So, a new poll just dropped that takes the pulse of the Australian public, and honestly, the results are pretty fascinating. It looks like people are wrestling with some big contradictions. Wanting serious action on climate, but at the same time pushing for more fossil fuels. And they're really not happy with their political leaders, but maybe not unhappy enough to totally shake things up. So, today, let's dig into that data and try to make sense of it. All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. The poll really highlights 5 key areas that show what's on Australia's mind right now. We're talking energy, national security, healthcare costs, social issues, and finally, how it all shakes out politically. Okay, first up, the energy dilemma. This is a big one. It's that classic tug of war, right? How do you secure affordable energy for today while also hitting those really important climate goals for tomorrow? So the poll didn't mess around. It put a really direct question to Australians. Basically, hey, do you support more oil and gas exploration, even if it puts our 2050 net zero goals at risk? It's a straight-up choice between energy security now versus those climate targets we've legally committed to. And the result? It's pretty striking. A really solid majority, 57% of people said, yep, let's explore more. Now compare that to only 21% who oppose it. That's more than double. It really feels like for a lot of folks, the immediate pressure of paying the bills is winning out over those longer-term climate concerns. So you might be thinking this is just an older generation thing, right? Well, not exactly. If you look at 18 to 24-year-olds, yeah, more of them oppose exploration than support it. But get this, support is still at 38%. That's a huge number, and it really suggests that even the generation you'd think is most focused on climate is feeling the pinch of high energy costs. And check this out, because this is where it really cuts across the usual political divides. Almost half of Labour voters are in favor. But the real shocker for me, 19% of Greens voters also want more drilling. 19%. That just goes to show you how deep this feeling runs right now. All right, next up, let's talk about securing our stockpile. This ties right into those energy concerns, but from a national security angle. We're talking about fuel reserves. Okay, so a little context here, because this is super important. The international standard, the recommendation, is that a country should have a 90-day supply of fuel just in case. 90 days. But right now, Australia has only about 30. That is a massive, massive gap. So what do people think we should do about this? Well, a whopping 63% support the government spending big, we're talking $20 billion over 4 years, to get that fuel reserve up to the 90-day mark. And just like we saw with the oil and gas exploration, this is not a partisan thing at all. I mean, look at this. You've got overwhelming support from Labour voters, 73%. And again, even nearly half of Green supporters, 46%, are on board with this idea. It's clearly seen as just common sense. Okay, let's shift gears now. We've talked big picture national issues, but now let's bring it right down to the household level, to something deeply personal, the high cost of health. And this number, well, it's a tough one, 20%. That means 1 in every 5 Australians has recently put off seeing a doctor or getting medical care simply because they were worried they couldn't afford it. And if we look at the whole picture, you can see that while just over half, 58%, felt they could afford the care they needed, well, that leaves a huge chunk of people who couldn't. You got 22% who struggled to pay, and that 20% who just delayed care. Add that up, and you get 42% of the country facing real hardship. This is that cost of living anxiety we keep talking about. Now, the poll didn't just stick to economic pressures. It also waded into some really sensitive social territory, specifically by gauging social tensions around the question of anti-Semitism. And the question they asked was very direct. How serious is anti-Semitism in Australia? And wow, the answers really show a country that's divided on this. So you can see a clear majority, 63%, believe it's either a very or somewhat serious problem. But look at that other number. More than a quarter of the country, 27%, think it's either a minor issue or just not a problem at all. That's a pretty big perception gap. And when you break this down by who people vote for, you see some really interesting patterns. The poll found that Greens voters were the least likely group to see anti-Semitism as a major issue. But, and this is an important but, a majority of them, 55%, still did consider it a serious concern. Okay, so we've covered energy, security, health, social issues. So what does this all mean for politics? Let's get to our final section, a political reckoning. So how are the leaders doing? Well, take a look at the satisfaction ratings. It's a dead heat. Both Prime Minister Albanese and opposition leader Angus Taylor are sitting at 38%. But here's the kicker. Look at the dissatisfied numbers. The PM has a much higher dissatisfaction rating, which suggests that while people know him more people also actively dislike his performance. Okay, and here is where things get really, really interesting. When the poll asked who people would prefer as prime minister, they threw in another name, Pauline Hanson. And she polled at 39% against the incumbent. That is the exact same level of support as the actual official leader of the opposition. That's a huge deal. There's a quote from the analysis of this poll that I think just perfectly sums up this mood. It says, "A very large number of Australians looked at our current situation, surveyed the available options, and thought we could do a lot worse." It really captures that feeling of deep unhappiness with the main choices, but also a real lack of a clear, compelling alternative. But here's the final twist in the tale. Despite all this restlessness and dissatisfaction, it hasn't actually flipped the numbers for the opposition. When you look at the two-party preferred result, after all the preferences are counted, Labor is still leading the coalition 53% to 47%. So if an election were held today, Labor would still win. And that really brings us to the central question this whole poll leaves hanging in the air, doesn't it? When you have this bigger gap between what the people seem to want on energy, on security, and what the government's policies are delivering, something has to give. So the final question is, what breaks first, the policies or the people's patience?